Margaret Sullivan sat on her old wooden chair and looked at the newspaper in her hands. The paper was wrinkled from being folded and opened many times. She had read the same advertisement over and over for 3 days now. The words seemed to jump off the page at her. Wanted, a good woman to marry. Must be strong and ready to work hard. Ranch life in Colorado. To William Carter, Cedar Ridge, Colorado. Maggie folded the paper and put it on the small table next to her chair. She looked around her tiny room in the Boston boarding house. The walls were thin, and she could hear Mrs. O'Brien yelling at her children in the next room.
Ow.
The smell of boiled cabbage from downstairs made her stomach turn. This place was not much, but it was all she could afford, at 28 years old. Maggie knew she was not the kind of woman men wanted to marry. She was not small and delicate like the ladies in the fashion magazines. Her body was round and full, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. Her brown hair was plain, and her face was ordinary. Men in Boston looked right through her as if she was not there at all. 3 weeks ago, Maggie had lost her job at the textile mill. Boss, Mr. Henley, had called all the workers together and told them the mill was closing. Too many factories were making cloth now, he said. There was not enough work for everyone. Maggie had worked at that mill for 8 years, starting when she was 20. Now she had no job and very little money left. She picked up the letter that had come from her sister Helen yesterday. Helen lived in a nice house outside Boston with her husband and 3 children. Helen wrote that Maggie could come live with them, but she would have to work as their maid and help take care of the children. Helen also wrote that Maggie should not expect to find a husband at her age and size. It would be better if Maggie just accepted that she would always be alone. Maggie felt tears start to come to her eyes. She wiped them away quickly. She had been taking care of herself since their parents died 5 years ago. Mother had been sick for a long time, and Maggie had worked during the day and cared for her mother at night. When her father got sick too, Maggie took care of both of them until they passed away within 6 months of each other. Helen had been married by then, lived too far away to help much. She came to the funerals and took some of their mother's jewelry, but she left Maggie to handle everything else. Maggie had to sell their small house to pay for the doctor bills and funeral costs. That was when she moved to the boarding house and started working longer hours at the mill. Now here she was, no job, no family who really wanted her, and no hope of things getting better in Boston. She looked at the newspaper again. What kind of man would put an advertisement in the paper looking for a wife? Was he so terrible that no woman in Colorado would marry him? Or was he just lonely like she was?
Maggie had
Heard stories about mail-order brides. Some stories were good, about women who found loving husbands and good homes. Other stories were scary, about men who lied or were mean to their wives. But what choice did she have? She could go live with Helen and be treated like a servant. Or she could try to make a new life for herself somewhere else. She went to her small wooden chest and took out paper, a pen, and ink. She sat down at the table and started to write. Dear Mr. Carter, I'm writing about your advertisement in the Boston Herald. My name is Margaret Sullivan, but most people call me Maggie. I'm 18 years old and I've never been married. I know that is old for a woman to still be single, but I have been taking care of my sick parents for many years. They both passed away 5 years ago. Maggie stopped writing and thought about what to say next. Should she tell him about losing her job? Should she be honest about what she looked like? She decided to tell the truth. If he did not want her after knowing the truth, it was better to find out now. I just lost my job at the textile mill where I worked for 8 years. I am a hard worker and I know how to cook, clean, and take care of a house. I also know how to tend to sick people, and I can read and write well. I am not a small woman, and I know I am not pretty like some ladies, but I am strong and healthy. I am honest, and I keep my word when I make a promise. She kept writing, telling him about growing up in Boston and about her parents. She wrote about how she could make bread and preserve food for winter. She told him she had saved a little money for the train ticket west if he decided he wanted to meet her. When she finished the letter, Maggie read it over 3 times. Then she went to her trunk and found the photograph she had taken at the studio. Last year, in the picture, she was sitting straight in a chair, wearing her best dark blue dress. Her face looked serious, and her full figure was clear to see. She almost decided not to send the photograph, but then she changed her mind. It was better for him to know what she looked like before she traveled all the way to Colorado. The next morning, Maggie walked to the post office. Her hands shook a little as she handed the letter to the postal clerk. She had put her last coins together to pay for the postage. Now all she could do was wait and hope. 2 weeks later, a letter came. For her, Maggie's heart beat fast as she opened it. Mr. Carter's handwriting was neat and easy to read. Dear Miss Sullivan, thank you for your honest letter. I am a rancher and I have a 7-year-old daughter named Lucy. My wife died 3 years ago. When Lucy was born, I need a good woman to help me take care of Lucy and to be a partner in making our ranch work. You sound like the kind of person who would fit well with our life here. If you are willing to come to Cedar Ridge and marry me, I will send money for your train ticket. Please let me know soon, as winter will be here before long, and travel will be harder then. Yours truly, William Carter. Maggie read the letter 5 times. Then she sat down and wrote back to tell him yes, she would come. As she walked to the post office again, she felt scared but also excited. In 2 weeks, she would be on a train heading west to a new life. She did not know what waited for her in Colorado, but it had to be better than staying in Boston with no hope for the future. The train whistled blew loud and long as it pulled into Cedar Ridge Station. Maggie Sullivan looked out the dusty window at the small town that would be her new home. The buildings were made of wood and looked much smaller than the ones in Boston. Mountains rose up all around the town like giant walls touching the sky. Maggie's hands were shaking as she gathered her 2 bags. Everything she owned in the world was packed inside them. The train ride had taken 5 days, and she was tired and dirty. Her dark blue traveling dress was wrinkled, and her hair had come loose from its pins. She tried to fix herself up as best she could before stepping off the train. The moment her feet touched the wooden platform, Maggie felt all eyes on her. A group of women stood near the station building, and they stopped talking to stare at her. She heard one of them whisper something, and then the others started whispering too. Maggie's cheeks turned red. She kept her head up and looked around for the man who was supposed to be her husband. William Carter stood by the general store across the street. He was tall and thin with brown hair and a beard. He wore work clothes and a hat, and he looked nervous. Next to him stood a little girl with blonde hair and braids. The child stayed close to her father and peeked out at Maggie from behind his leg. Bill Carter had been waiting for almost an hour. When he saw the woman getting off the train, he knew it had to be Maggie. Oh, she looked like her photograph, but she was bigger than he had expected. Much bigger. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake. Then he saw her looking around with scared but brave eyes. And something inside him softened. He walked across the street with Lucy holding tight to his hand. Miss Sullivan, he said when he reached her. Yes, that's me. You must be Mr. Carter. Maggie tried to smile, but she could see the surprise in his eyes. She knew he was thinking she was too big, too plain, too different from what he wanted. This is my daughter Lucy, Bill said. The little girl stayed behind her father and would not look at Maggie. Hello, Lucy, Maggie said in a gentle voice. She bent down so she was closer to the child's height. I've heard so much about you in your papa's letters. He told me you like to help take care of the animals on the ranch. Lucy looked up at Maggie for just a second, then hid her face again. But Maggie saw something in those quick blue eyes that reminded her of herself when she was young and afraid. A loud voice from behind them made everyone turn around. Well, Bill Carter. So this is your new wife. A woman with gray hair and a sharp face walked toward them. This was Mrs. Dorothy Price, and everyone in town knew she liked to know everybody's business. Mrs. Price, Bill said with a nod. He did not sound happy to see her. Mrs. Price looked Maggie up and down like she was judging a cow at market. My goodness, Bill. She's quite substantial, isn't she? I hope you have enough food to keep her happy. Some of the other women behind her started to giggle. Maggie felt her face burn with shame, but she kept her voice steady. How do you do, Mrs. Price? I'm Margaret Sullivan, soon to be Margaret Carter, I suppose, Mrs. Price said with a sniff. Well, I do hope you can work as hard as you look like you can eat. Bill's face turned red with anger. That's enough, Mrs. Price. Maggie just got here and she's tired from her long trip. Oh, defending her already? Are you? Mrs. Price smiled in a mean way. Well, I suppose, when a man gets desperate enough, he'll take whatever he can get. Bill picked up Maggie's bags and started walking toward a wagon at the end of the street. Come on, Maggie, Lucy, let's go home. As they walked away, Maggie could hear the women behind them talking. They were not trying to be quiet about it. She heard words like enormous and poor Bill. And what was he thinking? Each word felt like a slap across her face. The wagon ride to the ranch was quiet. Lucy sat between her father and Maggie, still too shy to talk. Bill tried to point out different places as they rode, but the conversation felt forced. Maggie looked at the beautiful mountains and wide open spaces, but she could not enjoy them. All she could think about was the way those women had looked. At her, the Carter Ranch sat in a valley with hills on both sides. The house was made of logs and was bigger than Maggie had expected. There was a barn, a chicken coop, and fences that held cattle. It looked like a good place to build a life. If the people in town would let her? It's not much, Bill said as he helped her down from the wagon. But it's home. It's beautiful, Maggie said, and she meant it. She had never lived anywhere with so much space and clean air. Inside the house, Maggie could see that Bill had been trying to keep things neat, but it was clear he needed help. The kitchen was clean but plain, and there were no curtains on the windows. Everything looked like it was just for staying alive, not for making a real home. Lucy, show Maggie to her room, Bill said. Then we'll have some supper. Lucy led Maggie to a small room at the back of the house. It had a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple but clean. Thank you, Lucy, Maggie said. This will be perfect. Lucy started to leave, then stopped. Are you really going to marry my papa? She asked in a small voice. Yes, I am. Tomorrow, in fact. Is that all right with you? Lucy thought for a moment. I guess so. Papa says I need a mama. My real mama died when I was born. Maggie's heart broke a little for this serious little girl. I know, sweetheart. I can never take the place of your real mama, but I hope we can be friends. Lucy nodded and ran out of the room. That evening, at supper, Maggie cooked the first meal in her new home. She made biscuits and gravy with some eggs and bacon. It was simple food, but it was good. She noticed that both Bill and Lucy ate more than one helping. This is real good, Bill said. It's better than anything I've made in a long time. After Lucy went to bed, Bill and Maggie sat at the kitchen table and talked about the wedding tomorrow. It would be small, just them and the preacher, and maybe a few people from town. About what happened today, Bill started. Mrs. Price and those other women, ... they had no right to talk to you that way? It's all right, Maggie said, even though it was not all right at all. I know what I look like. I know what people think when they see me. You look like a good, strong woman to me, Bill said quietly. And that's what I need. What Lucy needs. Maggie looked at this man who was going to be her husband tomorrow. He was not saying he thought she was pretty or that he loved her, but he was being kind, and right now, that was enough. The next morning, they walked to the small church in town for their wedding. Only a few people were there, the preacher, the doctor, and the man who ran the general store with his wife. Mrs. Price sat in the back pew with her arms crossed, like she was watching a show she did not approve of. Reverend Paul Mitchell read the wedding words, and Bill and Maggie promised to be husband and wife. When it was over, they were married. Like that, Maggie Sullivan became Maggie Carter, and her new life began. Maggie woke up before sunrise on her first morning as Mrs. Carter. The house was quiet and cold. She could hear Bill moving around in the barn outside, doing the morning chores. Lucy was still sleeping in her small room next to the kitchen. Maggie got dressed quickly and went to the kitchen. She had noticed yesterday that Bill's cooking was very simple. He made the same things over and over, beans, bacon, and bread that was hard as rocks. She looked in the pantry and found flour, some dried meat, and a few vegetables that were starting to go bad. By the time Bill came in from the barn, Maggie had breakfast ready. She had made fresh biscuits, scrambled eggs, with bits of the dried meat mixed in, and fried potatoes with onions. The smell filled the whole house. "Good morning," Bill said. He looked surprised to see so much food on the table. "You didn't have to get up so early." "I wanted to," Maggie said. "This is my home now, too." Lucy came into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. When she saw the food, her mouth fell open. "All this is for breakfast." "Sit down and eat," Maggie said with a smile. "Growing girls need good food." Bill and Lucy ate like they had not seen a real meal in months. Lucy kept looking at Maggie like she could not believe someone could cook this well. When they were done, Bill pushed back from the table and patted his stomach. "That was the best meal I've had since my Emma passed away," he said. Then his face turned red, like he had said something wrong. "Thank you," Maggie said quietly. Glad you liked it." After Bill left to work with the cattle, Maggie started cleaning the house. She had noticed that everything was just pushed into corners or left where it fell. Bill had been trying his best, but taking care of a house was not something he knew how to do well. She washed all the clothes and hung them outside to dry. She swept every floor and washed every window. She found old curtains in a trunk and hung them up to make the rooms feel warmer. By the time Lucy came home from school, the house looked completely different. "Wow," Lucy said when she walked in. "It looks so nice. Would you like to help me make supper?" Maggie asked. Lucy nodded quickly. She had never helped cook before, but Maggie was patient and showed her how to peel vegetables and mix ingredients. They made beef stew with dumplings, and Lucy was proud when her father said it was delicious. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Maggie got up early to make breakfast and pack lunch for Bill to take with him. She spent her days cleaning, cooking, and getting the house ready for winter. Lucy started staying after school to help, instead of running off to play. But going to town was always hard for Maggie. Every Saturday, she had to go to the general store to buy supplies. The women there would stop talking when she walked in, then start whispering as soon as she passed by. One Saturday, Maggie was looking at fabric when she heard Mrs. Price talking loud enough for everyone to hear. "I saw her eating 3 pieces of pie at the church social," Mrs. Price said to Mrs. Clara Thompson, the store owner's wife. 3 pieces. No wonder poor Bill looked so tired. He must be working extra hard just to keep food on the table. Mrs. Thompson giggled. "Did you see how she filled her plate? I've never seen a woman eat so much at one time." Maggie felt her face get hot. She had only eaten 1 piece of pie, and her plate had not been any fuller than anyone else's. She knew it did not matter what was true. These women had decided to dislike her. They would say whatever they wanted. She paid for her supplies and left without saying anything. But that night at supper, she barely ate anything. Bill noticed. "You feeling all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," Maggie said, "just not very hungry." Lucy looked worried. "But you always eat with us. Don't you like your own cooking?" Maggie smiled at the little girl. "Of course I do. I'm just tired tonight." But Bill could tell something was wrong. After Lucy went to bed, he asked Maggie what had happened in town. "It's nothing," Maggie said. "Just some silly women with nothing better to do than gossip." "Oh, what did they say?" Maggie told him about Mrs. Price and Mrs. Thompson. Bill's face got red with anger. "Those women don't know what they're talking about," he said. "We work harder than any of them. This place has never looked better, and Lucy is happier than she's been since her mother died." "It doesn't matter," Maggie said. "People see what they want to see. It matters to me," Bill said firmly. "It should matter to you too." The real test came in early November when a bad storm hit the area. It started snowing on a Tuesday and did not stop for 3 days. The wind was so strong it knocked down trees and blew the roof off the chicken coop. On the second day of the storm, Bill went out to check on the cattle and found one of his best cows trying to give birth. The calf was stuck and the cow was in trouble. He came running back to the house. "Maggie, I need help," he said. "Bessie's having trouble with her calf and I can't handle it alone." Most women would have stayed in the warm house and let the men handle the animals. But Maggie grabbed her coat and followed Bill out into the freezing wind and snow. The cow was lying on her side in the barn, breathing hard. Maggie had helped when animals gave birth back in Boston, when her family lived on the edge of town and kept a few animals. "Hold her head steady," Maggie told Bill. She rolled up her sleeves and knelt down beside the cow. The work was messy and hard, but she did not stop. After almost an hour, she managed to turn the calf and help it come into the world. Both the mother and baby were alive and healthy. Bill stared at Maggie with new respect. "I never saw anything like that," he said. "Most ladies I know would have fainted." "I'm not most ladies," Maggie said, wiping her hands on a rag. The next morning, Bill's prize bull got sick. The animal would not eat and seemed to have trouble breathing. Bill was worried because the bull was worth a lot of money and was important for breeding. Maggie looked at the sick animal and remembered something her grandmother had taught her about treating animals. She mixed up some herbs and got the bull to drink it. She stayed in the barn most of the day, watching over him and giving him the medicine every few hours. By evening, the bull was better. He was eating again, and his breathing was normal. "Could not believe it. How did you know what to do?" he asked. "My grandmother knew about healing," Maggie said. "She taught me that animals and people sometimes need the same kinds of help." That night at supper, Lucy was full of excitement about what had happened. "Papa told me how you saved Bessie and her baby, and then you made Champion feel better too," she said. "You're like a magic person," Maggie laughed. "Not magic, sweetie. Just someone who pays attention and tries to help." But Bill was looking at his wife with different eyes. She was not just someone to cook and clean and take care of Lucy. She was a partner who could work beside him and help make the ranch successful. Over the next few weeks, more neighbors started to hear about what Maggie had done. When Mr. Adams, from the next ranch over, had trouble with a sick horse, he came to ask for Maggie's help. She was able to cure the horse, and word spread that the new Mrs. Carter knew about healing animals. Lucy was changing too. She used to be quiet and sad most of the time. Now she laughed and played and talked about her day at school. She started calling Maggie Mama Maggie without being asked to. The change in the little girl was so clear that even people in town started to notice, but the women in town still whispered and made mean comments. They could not understand how someone who looked like Maggie could be good at anything important. They would rather believe their cruel stories than see the truth. That was right in front of them. The first big snowstorm of winter came early that year. It started on a Monday morning in late November, when most people thought they still had time to get ready for the cold months ahead. Maggie was making breakfast when she looked out the kitchen window and saw thick snowflakes falling fast and heavy. "Bill," she called to her husband, who was getting ready to go check on the cattle. "Look at this snow. I've never seen it come down so hard." Bill came to the window and his face got serious. "This doesn't look good. The wind is picking up too. This might be a real bad one." By noon, the wind was howling around the house, and the snow was so thick they could not see the barn from the kitchen window. Bill came in from outside covered in snow from head to toe. "I've never seen a storm this bad this early in the season," he said, shaking the snow off his coat. "Good thing you made me bring in extra wood last week." The storm went on for 3 days. On the second day, they heard someone knocking hard on their door. Bill opened it, and Mr. George Adams from the general store almost fell into the house. He was covered in snow and shaking from the cold. "Bill, thank God you're here," Mr. Adams said. "My wife Clara is having her baby, and something is wrong. Dr. Brooks is stuck at the Miller farm and can't get to town. We don't know what to do." Looked at Maggie. "Do you know anything about helping with babies?" Maggie had helped when her neighbor in Boston had her baby, and her grandmother had delivered many babies back in Ireland. "I can try," she said. "Let me get my things." She packed a bag with clean cloth, some herbs her grandmother had taught her about, and hot water in jars to keep it warm. Then she put on her heavy coat and boots. The trip to town was dangerous. The snow was so deep that they had to walk most of the way, with Bill going first to make a path. The wind was so strong that it knocked Maggie down twice, but she got up and kept going. When they got to the Adams house, Clara was in bed crying and holding her stomach. She looked scared and was very pale. Mrs. Price was there trying to help, but she looked just as scared as Clara. "Oh, thank goodness," Mrs. Price said when she saw Maggie. "Clara has been like this for hours, and the baby won't come." Maggie went to Clara and felt her stomach gently. She could tell the baby was not in the right position. This was dangerous for both the mother and the baby. "Clara, I need you to listen to me," Maggie said in a calm voice. "I'm going to help you, but you have to do exactly what I tell you." For the next 4 hours, Maggie worked to help Clara and her baby. She had Clara move to different positions and showed her how to breathe. She used the herbs to make tea that would help with the pain. Mrs. Price and Mr. Adams watched as Maggie worked with gentle hands and a steady voice. Finally, the baby came. It was a little girl, and she was healthy and strong, Clara cried with happiness as Maggie put the baby in her arms. "You saved us both, Clara," whispered to Maggie. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Mrs. Price stared at Maggie with new eyes. "I've never seen anything like that," she said quietly. "You knew exactly what to do." But the storm was not over, and neither was the emergency. The next day, someone came to the Adams house, saying that old Mrs. Betty Wilson was very sick and might be dying. Her son could not get to her house because of the snow. She was all alone. Without being asked, Maggie put on her coat and boots. Again. "I'll go check on her," she said. "Can't go out in this weather again," Bill said. "It's too dangerous." "She might die if no one helps her," Maggie replied. "I have to try." This time, several men from town went with her, including Mr. Adams and even Reverend Mitchell. They had to break through snow that was higher than their knees to get to Mrs. Wilson's small house. They found the old woman in bed with a high fever and trouble breathing. Maggie felt her head and listened to her chest. It sounded like pneumonia, which could kill someone Mrs. Wilson's age. Maggie stayed with Mrs. Wilson for 2 days, giving her medicine made from herbs and keeping her warm. She barely slept, checking on the old woman every hour. Slowly, Mrs. Wilson started to get better. Her fever went down, and she could breathe easier. On the 4th day of the storm, something terrible happened. Someone saw smoke coming from the schoolhouse and ran to tell everyone. The building was on fire, and the wind was making it spread fast. All the men in town ran to help fight the fire, but the wind and snow made it almost impossible. They were trying to save the building when someone screamed that little Timothy Barnes was still inside. He was the schoolteacher's 6-year-old son, and he had been playing in the school when the fire started. All the men stood outside looking at the burning building. Fire was too big and too hot. No one wanted to go inside because they might not come out alive. But Maggie did not stop to think about the danger. She ran toward the burning schoolhouse while everyone else stood frozen with fear. "Maggie, no," Bill shouted. "It's too dangerous." Maggie ignored him and ran into the building. The smoke was so thick she could barely see, and the heat was terrible. She called Timothy's name over and over until she heard a small voice crying. From behind the teacher's desk, she found the little boy hiding under the desk, too scared to move. Maggie grabbed him and carried him toward the door, but part of the ceiling fell down and blocked their way. She had to find another way out. With Timothy in her arms, Maggie felt along the walls until she found a window. She broke the glass with a chair and climbed out. Falling into the snow with the boy still in her arms, the people watching could not believe what they had seen. This woman they had made fun of and said cruel things about had just risked her life to save a child. Maggie's arms were burned from the fire, and she had breathed in a lot of smoke. Dr. Brooks, who had finally made it to town, took care of her burns and said she was lucky to be alive. Timothy's parents cried and thanked Maggie over and over. His mother, Mrs. Ruth Barnes, held Maggie's hand and said, "You saved my baby's life. I will never forget what you did." As word spread about everything Maggie had done during the storm, the people of Cedar Ridge started to see her differently. She had delivered Clara's baby safely, nursed Mrs. Wilson back to health, and saved Timothy from the fire. She had risked her own life to help others. When everyone else was too scared to act, Mrs. Price came to visit. Maggie, while she was recovering from her burns, she sat by Maggie's bed and looked ashamed. "I owe you an apology," Mrs. Price said quietly. "I said terrible things about you when you first came to town. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "It's all right," Maggie said. "We all make mistakes." "It's not all right," Mrs. Price continued. "You're a hero, and I treated you like you were nothing. You've shown more courage and kindness than any of us." Bill sat beside Maggie's bed holding her bandaged hand. He looked at his wife with eyes full of love and wonder. "I married you because I needed help with Lucy and the ranch," he said softly. "But now I know I got so much more than that. You're the bravest, most caring person I've ever known." Maggie felt tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. The first time since coming to Cedar Ridge, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. Spring came early to Cedar Ridge that year. The snow melted away by the end of March, and green grass started growing in the fields around town. Maggie stood in her kitchen garden, planting seeds for vegetables she would grow for her family. Her arms had healed from the burns she got saving Timothy, and only small scars remained to remind her of that terrible day. Everything was different now. When Maggie went to town on Saturday mornings, people smiled and waved at her. Mrs. Thompson, at the general store, always asked how she was feeling and if she needed anything special. Even Mrs. Price had become friendly, often stopping to chat about the weather or ask for advice about cooking. "Good morning, Maggie," Mrs. Price said as she walked up to the garden fence. "My goodness, your vegetables are growing so well already. Mine never looked that good." "The secret is good soil and plenty of water," Maggie said, wiping dirt from her hands. "I'd be happy to show you how I prepare the ground if you'd like." "Would you really? That's so kind of you." Mrs. Price looked almost shy, very different from the mean woman who had said such cruel things when Maggie first arrived in town. Later that morning, Clara Adams came by with her baby daughter, little Annie. The baby was healthy and beautiful, with bright blue eyes and soft brown hair. "I wanted to thank you again," Clara said, holding her baby close. "Dr. Brooks told me that if you hadn't helped that night, Annie and I might not have made it. You saved both our lives. I'm just glad." "I could help," Maggie said, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "She's beautiful, Clara. Would you like to hold her?" Maggie took the baby carefully in her arms. Little Annie looked up at her with curious eyes and made soft baby sounds. Holding her made Maggie's heart feel warm and full. That afternoon, the women from the church auxiliary came to visit. These were the same women who used to whisper about Maggie and make her feel unwelcome. Now they had come to ask her to join their group. "We're starting a cooking class for the young wives in town," said Mrs. Kate Miller, the group leader. "We were hoping you would teach it. Everyone knows you're the best cook in Cedar Ridge." Maggie was so surprised she almost could not speak. "You want me to teach cooking?" "Oh yes," said Mrs. Sarah Johnson. "My husband has been begging me to learn how to make biscuits like yours ever since he ate them at the church social. And my bread always comes out hard as rocks," added Mrs. Mary Foster. "Please say you'll help us." Maggie agreed to teach the cooking class, and it became one of the most popular activities in town. Every Tuesday afternoon, 8 young women came to Maggie's kitchen to learn how to make bread, pies, and hearty meals for their families. They laughed and talked as they worked, and Maggie finally felt like she had real friends. But the most important change was happening between Maggie and Bill. He watched her every day with growing admiration and something deeper that he was afraid to name. She had proven herself to be everything he needed in a partner and more. She was strong, brave, kind, and smart. She had made their house into a real home and had given Lucy the mother she needed. One evening in May, after Lucy had gone to bed, Bill and Maggie sat on the front porch, watching the sunset over the mountains. They often sat together like this now, talking about their day or just enjoying the peaceful quiet. "Maggie," Bill said, his voice nervous, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him with concern. "What is it? You sound worried." A deep breath. He'd been thinking about this for weeks, but he was scared to say the words out loud. "When I wrote that advertisement for a wife, I was just looking for someone to help me with Lucy and the house. I thought marriage would be like a business arrangement." "I know," Maggie said quietly. "That's what I thought too. But somewhere along the way, things changed for me." Bill turned to look at her directly. "You became so much more than I ever expected. You made this place feel like home again. You made Lucy happy. You showed the whole town what real strength and courage look like." Maggie felt her heart beating faster. She had hoped Bill cared for her, but she had never dared to think it might be more than gratitude and friendship. "What I'm trying to say is, ... double quotes. Bill reached for her hand. "Maggie, not because of what you do for us, but because of who you are. You're the most amazing woman I've ever known." Tears filled Maggie's eyes. For so many years, she had believed that no man could ever love her because of how she looked. She had come to Cedar Ridge thinking she would spend her life being useful but never truly wanted. "Oh, Bill," she whispered, "I love you too. I've loved you for months, but I was afraid to hope that you might feel the same way." Bill stood up and pulled her to her feet. Then he kissed her gently, and Maggie felt like her heart might burst. With happiness, when they broke apart, both of them were smiling with tears in their eyes. "I want you to know something," Bill said, holding her hands in his. "You are beautiful to me. Not just your kind heart and brave spirit, but all of you. I think you're the most beautiful woman in the world." From that night on, their marriage became a true partnership built on love instead of just need. They worked together during the day and talked and laughed together in the evenings. Lucy could see the change in both her parents, and it made her happy too. "Mama Maggie," Lucy said one morning at breakfast, "are you and Papa different now?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Maggie asked. "You both smile more? Papa hugs you now, not just when you're sad or hurt?" Maggie and Bill looked at each other and laughed. "We're happy, Lucy," Bill said. "All three of us are happy." Summer brought more good news. Dr. Brooks confirmed what Maggie had suspected for several weeks. She was going to have a baby. When she told Bill, he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen while Lucy clapped and cheered. "A baby," Lucy said, jumping up and down. "I'm going to be a big sister." The whole town was excited about the news. Women who had once whispered cruel things about Maggie now stopped by to bring gifts for the baby and offer advice. Mrs. Price even knitted a beautiful blanket with yellow yarn since they did not know if the baby would be a boy or girl. In October, Cedar Ridge held its annual Harvest Festival. This year, everyone asked Maggie to organize the event. She planned games for the children, arranged for music and dancing, and organized a big feast where everyone brought food to share. The day of the festival was perfect, with clear blue skies and warm sunshine. Maggie, now obviously pregnant, moved slowly but happily among the townspeople, making sure everyone was having a good time. She had made 5 different kinds of pie for the dessert table. They were the first to disappear. As evening came and the dancing started, Bill found Maggie sitting on a bench watching Lucy play with the other children. He sat down beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you tired?" he asked. "We can go home if you want." "No, I'm fine," Maggie said, leaning against him. "I just like watching everyone have fun. A year ago, I never thought I would belong anywhere. Now look around. These people are our friends and neighbors. This is our home." Bill followed her gaze around the festival. Timothy Barnes ran up and hugged Maggie's legs before running off to play again. Claire Adams waved from across the field, where she was talking with other young mothers. Mrs. Price was helping serve food and directing. Volunteers with the authority of someone who truly cared about her community. "You did this," Bill said, squeezing Maggie's hand. "You changed everything, not just for us, but for this whole town. You showed everyone what really matters." "We did this together," Maggie corrected him. "You, me, and Lucy. We're a family." As they sat together watching their community celebrate around them, Maggie thought about the scared, lonely woman who had stepped off the train in Cedar Ridge more than a year ago. That woman had been looking for a place to survive. Instead, she had found a place to truly live, to love, and to be loved in return. She had learned that real beauty came from the heart, and that true love could see past the surface to the person underneath. The baby kicked inside her, as if agreeing with her thoughts, and Maggie smiled. Their story was far from over. There would be more challenges, more joys, and more love to come. But whatever the future held, they would face it together as a family, surrounded by a community that had learned to look beyond appearances to see the worth of every person as the stars came out over Cedar Ridge. Maggie Carter knew she was exactly where she belonged.